Silent Kingdom. Lysara Rathmore had always been told not to enter the woods after dusk. But the night she did, the world shifted. The howling began. The torches burned low. The air smelled of rain and blood. And then he stepped forward golden-eyed, broad-shouldered, his voice low as a growl. "You crossed into my territory," he murmured. "Now you fight for it." Chapter 1. The Night of Whispers and Howls. The wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth, a familiar perfume that had always calmed Lysara Rathmore. Tonight, however, it carried an undercurrent of something else, something wild and unsettling. The village of Oakhaven, nestled at the edge of the Hollowfong Woods, felt different. Quieter. The usual evening sounds, the murmur of conversations, the clinking of mugs from the tavern, the laughter of children were muted, replaced by a thick, expectant silence. Lysara, wrapped in a worn shawl, paused at the edge of her garden, her gaze drawn to the looming darkness of the trees. She was 57, her life a tapestry woven with threads of quiet contentment and lingering sorrow. The lines etched around her eyes spoke of laughter and loss in equal measure. Her silver hair, once the color of spun moonlight, was pulled back in a simple braid, revealing the delicate curve of her jaw and the stubborn set of her chin. She'd buried her husband, Thomas, 5 years ago, a quiet, gentle man felled by a sudden illness that had swept through Oakhaven like a phantom. The grief had settled deep in her bones, a constant ache that reminded her of the fragility of life, of the way happiness could be snatched away in an instant. The villagers' warnings echoed in her mind, as they had every night of her life. Never enter Hollowfong Woods after dusk. It was a rule as old as Oakhaven itself, passed down through generations, whispered in hushed tones around crackling fires. Tales of strange creatures, of shadows that moved with a life of their own, of howls that chilled the blood, were woven into the very fabric of their existence. Lysara, a practical woman, had always dismissed them as old wives' tales, folklore designed to keep children in line. But tonight, the air hummed with an undeniable energy, a primal pulse that resonated deep within her. Her daughter, Alara, had pleaded with her to stay inside. "Mother, it's not safe," she'd said, her voice tight with worry. Alara, at 30, was a mirror image of Lysara in her youth, with the same fiery spirit and unwavering loyalty. But Lysara had waved her off, a familiar stubbornness rising within her. She needed the solitude, the quiet communion with nature that always soothed her restless spirit. She needed to feel something other than the gnawing emptiness that had consumed her since Thomas's death. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, dancing shadows that stretched and distorted the familiar shapes of the trees. Lysara took a hesitant step onto the overgrown path, the crunch of dried leaves under her boots the only sound in the stillness. The air grew colder, the scent of pine sharper, laced with that unsettling, wild undercurrent. She pulled her shawl tighter, a shiver tracing its way down her spine. It started subtly, a low rumble that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Then, a howl, long and mournful, ripped through the silence, followed by another and another, until the woods were filled with a chorus of chilling cries. Lysara froze, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. This was no ordinary wolf pack. The sound was too powerful, too resonant, filled with a depth of emotion that was both terrifying and strangely compelling. Torches flickered in the distance, closer to the village edge, their orange glow swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Voices, raised in alarm, reached her ears, but they seemed distant, unreal. She was alone, enveloped by the shadows and the howls, caught in a world that felt both ancient and terrifyingly new. Then the air shifted. The scent of rain, sharp and clean, mingled with something else, a musky, animalistic odor that sent a primal shiver through her. The howls intensified, closer now, surrounding her. She could feel the ground vibrate beneath her feet, the rhythm of approaching something. A figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into a sliver of moonlight. He was tall, impossibly so, his silhouette framed against the trees like a creature sculpted from the night itself. Broad shoulders, a powerful stance, and eyes. Eyes that glowed with an unnatural, golden light, piercing the darkness like twin embers. He moved with a fluid grace, an almost predatory elegance that sent a wave of fear and something else washing over her. Something akin to awe. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze locking onto hers. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that made it hard to breathe. His features were sharp, defined, his face a mask of controlled power. He was dressed in dark clothing, leather and furs that seemed to blend seamlessly with the shadows. He looked wild, untamed, a creature of the very woods she had been warned to avoid. "You crossed into my territory," he murmured, his voice low and resonant, a rumble that echoed the earlier howls. It was a voice that spoke of ancient power, of secrets hidden deep within the earth. It was a voice that, despite the inherent threat, held a strange, captivating quality. Lasara found her voice, though it trembled slightly. I meant no harm. I was just," she trailed off, unable to articulate the restless yearning that had driven her into the woods. He tilted his head, his golden eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Just what?" he prompted, his voice a silken whisper that belied the underlying steel. She straightened her shoulders, summoning a courage she didn't know she possessed. "I was just walking," she said, her voice firmer now. "I've lived here all my life. This is my home." A flicker of something amusement, contempt, crossed his face. "Your home?" he repeated, the word laced with a subtle mockery. "This is Holofong territory. And you, little human, are trespassing." The howls rose again, closer now, a chorus of voices that seemed to echo his words. Lasara felt a surge of defiance, a spark of the woman she used to be, before grief had dulled her edges. She would not cower. She would not be intimidated. "Then I suppose," she said, meeting his gaze, her chin lifted, "I have no choice." She took a step closer. He watched her, a silent, predatory stillness that was more terrifying than any overt threat. The moonlight glinted off something metallic at his wrist, a heavy silver bracelet etched with strange symbols. He seemed to be waiting, assessing, deciding now. His voice was lower, deeper. He didn't move, but the air around him became thick and charged with electricity. "You fight for it." The unspoken question hung in the air. What did that mean? Chapter 2. Echoes of a Forgotten Pact. The words hung in the air, heavy and charged with an unspoken threat. Fight for it. Lasara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of the ever-present howls. She stared at the creature before her, his golden eyes burning into hers, and tried to make sense of his words. Fight? How? Against what? He remained motionless, a statue carved from the night itself, his silence more intimidating than any roar. The air around him crackled with an energy she could feel, a palpable force that pressed against her skin, making it difficult to breathe. The scent of rain and that underlying musky odor intensified, triggering a primal instinct within her, a deep, unsettling awareness of being in the presence of something ancient and powerful, something far beyond her understanding. Fight for what? She finally managed to ask, her voice a strained whisper that barely carried over the wind rustling through the trees. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed both curious and mocking. "For your right to be here," he said, his voice still that low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath her feet. "For your life, perhaps. Or perhaps for something more." His words were cryptic, unsettling. She scanned his face, searching for any clue, any hint of what he meant. His features were sharp, almost severe, framed by dark hair that fell to his shoulders. But it was his eyes that held her captive, those glowing golden orbs that seemed to see straight through her, stripping away her defenses, laying bare her fears and vulnerabilities. Suddenly, a memory surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. A story her grandmother used to tell, a tale she had dismissed as childish folklore. A tale of the Hallowfang Pact, an ancient agreement forged between the villagers of Oakhaven and the creatures of the woods. A pact that ensured peace, a delicate balance maintained by strict boundaries and unspoken rules. A pact that, according to her grandmother, was sealed with blood and sacrifice. Lasara had always scoffed at the story. But now, standing here in the heart of Hallowfang Woods, facing this being, she felt a shiver of doubt creep into her certainty. Could there be some truth to the old tales? Could this man be what? A guardian? A protector? Or something far more dangerous? The pact, she whispered, the word barely audible. You know of it? His golden eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise, quickly masked, crossing his face. He took a step closer, the movement fluid and graceful, almost predatory. The air between them thickened, the unseen energy intensifying. The pact is more than just a story, little human, he said, his voice a silken whisper that sent shivers down her spine. It is the law of this land, and you have broken it. I didn't know, she stammered, feeling a wave of dizziness wash over her. I needed to. He cut her off with a wave of his hand, a gesture that was both dismissive and commanding. Ignorance is no excuse. The woods remember. The pact remembers. And he paused, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. I am its enforcer. He reached out, his hand moving with a speed that defied her perception. Before she could react, his fingers brushed against her cheek, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt of electricity through her. She gasped, recoiling instinctively, but his grip tightened, holding her captive. His touch was surprisingly gentle, despite the underlying strength she sensed in his grip. His skin was warm, almost feverishly so, and she could feel a subtle vibration emanating from him, a humming energy that resonated deep within her bones. She stared into his eyes, mesmerized and terrified, feeling a strange pull, a connection that defied logic and reason. There is something different about you, he murmured, his voice barely audible above the howls that were now closer, circling them like a pack of hungry wolves. Something old. Something that calls to the woods, to the ancient magic that flows through this land. Lasara felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of recognition. She had always felt a connection to the woods, a deep sense of belonging that she had never been able to explain. She had always felt different, somehow, set apart from the other villagers, haunted by a sense of longing, a feeling that she was missing something, a piece of herself that she couldn't quite grasp. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. He released her cheek, his hand lingering in the air for a moment before dropping back to his side. He took a step back, creating a sliver of space between them, but the connection, the invisible thread that bound them together, remained. You will, he said, his golden eyes holding hers captive. In time you will understand. But for now he paused, his gaze sweeping over her, assessing, calculating. You are bound to me. To the pact. To Hallowfang. He turned abruptly.
Come.
It wasn't a request. Lasara felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. Where was he taking her? What did he mean by bound? But she also knew, with a chilling certainty, that she had no choice. She had crossed a line, entered a world she didn't understand, and now she was caught in its web. She had to follow. She braced herself and followed after him, deeper into the woods. The howls followed. Chapter 3. Scars of the past, marks of the future. The woods swallowed them whole. Ancient trees, their branches gnarled and twisted like the limbs of ancient beings, reached out to clutch at the fading moonlight. Lasara stumbled along behind the enigmatic figure, his pace swift and sure, hers hesitant and filled with a growing sense of unease. The scent of pine and damp earth was now overlaid with that musky, animalistic odor, a constant reminder of the wildness that surrounded her, of the power that emanated from the man, the creature she followed. He didn't speak, didn't look back. He moved with a silent grace, a predator navigating its domain, and Lasara felt a growing sense of vulnerability, of being a small, insignificant creature caught in the web of something far larger and more powerful than herself. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the chill that had settled deep in her bones, a chill that had little to do with the night air and everything to do with the fear that gnawed at her. She tried to focus on the details, to ground herself in the tangible. The rough bark of the trees, the crunch of leaves under her boots, the distant flicker of torches that marked the edge of the village, a world that now seemed impossibly far away. She thought of Alara, her daughter, and a pang of guilt shot through her. Alara would be worried, frantic even. Lasara should have listened, should have stayed within the safety of the village walls. But it was too late now. She had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. As they walked, she studied the man ahead of her, trying to decipher the enigma he represented. He was tall, even taller than she had first realized, his shoulders broad and powerful beneath the dark layers of leather and fur. His hair, the color of raven's wings, fell to his shoulders, framing a face that was both striking and unsettling. She hadn't seen his features clearly in the dim light, but she remembered the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the strong line of his jaw, and, above all, those eyes, those mesmerizing, golden eyes that seemed to hold the secrets of the ancient woods. He moved with an effortless grace, an almost supernatural agility that made her wonder, again, about his true nature. Was he truly human? Or was he something else entirely, something that belonged to the realm of myth and legend? The stories her grandmother had told her, the tales of shapeshifters, of beings that could walk between the worlds of human and animal, flooded her mind. She had always dismissed them as fanciful tales, but now, she wasn't so sure. Suddenly he stopped. Lasara almost bumped into him, her heart leaping into her throat. He turned, his golden eyes piercing the darkness, fixing her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "We are here," he said, his voice a low rumble that echoed through the stillness of the woods. Lasara looked around, her eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light. They were in a small clearing, surrounded by a circle of ancient trees. In the center of the clearing stood a massive oak, its trunk wider than any tree she had ever seen, its branches reaching up towards the sky like the arms of a giant. The air here was thick with an almost palpable energy, a sense of ancient power that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. He gestured towards the oak. "This is the heart of Holofong," he said. "The place where the pact was forged. The place where your fate will be decided." Lasara felt a shiver of fear run down her spine. Fate decided? What did that mean? She looked at the massive oak, its gnarled trunk etched with strange symbols, and felt a sense of foreboding, a premonition of something momentous, something irreversible, about to happen. He moved towards the tree, his hand reaching out to touch the rough bark. As his fingers made contact, a faint golden glow emanated from the symbols, illuminating the clearing with an ethereal light. Lasara watched, mesmerized and terrified, as the man seemed to draw strength from the tree, his body radiating an even more intense energy. He turned back to her, his golden eyes burning with an almost feverish intensity. "The pact demands a price," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. "For every transgression, there must be a balancing." Lasara's mind raced. What price? What balancing? She thought of the stories, of the sacrifices that had been made to appease the creatures of the woods. A cold dread gripped her heart. What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his words slow and deliberate, each syllable resonating with an ancient power. "I want to know your story, Lasara Rathmore," he said. "I want to know the secrets you hold, the scars you carry. I want to know why you, of all people, were drawn to the woods tonight. I want to know if you are worthy." He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his presence overwhelming. "Tell me," he urged, his voice a low, hypnotic murmur about the sorrow that haunts your eyes. "Tell me about the loss that has carved itself into your soul. Tell me everything." A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek. She didn't understand. Not yet. But the ancient oak, and this man who is not a man, were about to expose every hidden corner of her heart. And it terrified her. Chapter 4. The Scent of Rain and Blood. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the scent of rain intensifying as dark clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the storm brewing within Lasara. His command, his demand, to reveal her deepest sorrows, hung between them like a tangible entity. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he had already stripped away her defenses, leaving her bare and trembling before him. She looked into his golden eyes, those mesmerizing orbs that seemed to see straight through to her soul, and felt a strange mix of fear and something else. A flicker of recognition? A sense of inevitability? She didn't know, but she knew she couldn't lie, couldn't hide. He would see through any pretense, any attempt to shield herself from his scrutiny. My story? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling of the leaves. It's not a story worth telling. He tilted his head, a gesture that was both curious and challenging. Every story is worth telling, Lasara Rathmore, he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble. Especially those that are etched in pain and loss. Those are the stories that shape us, that define us. Those are the stories that reveal the truth. He gestured towards a fallen log near the base of the ancient oak. Sit, he commanded, his voice gentle but firm. And tell me about the man you buried. Tell me about the emptiness that haunts you. Tell me why you came here tonight. Lasara hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered herself onto the log, her body stiff and aching. She felt the dampness of the wood seep through her clothes, a physical manifestation of the cold dread that had settled in her heart. She looked at the ground, at the intricate patterns of roots and leaves, unable to meet his gaze. His name was Thomas, she began, her voice a strained whisper. He was a good man. A kind man. We were happy. The words felt hollow, inadequate, a pale imitation of the love she had shared with Thomas. How could she possibly convey the depth of their bond, the quiet joy they had found in each other's company, the comfortable rhythm of their lives together? How could she explain the gaping hole his death had left in her heart, the emptiness that had consumed her, leaving her adrift and alone? Happy? He repeated, the word laced with a subtle skepticism. And yet, you are here, in the heart of Hollowfong Woods, breaking an ancient pact, risking everything. Why? Lasara closed her eyes, the image of Thomas's face, his gentle smile, his loving eyes, flashing before her. The memory, once a source of comfort, now felt like a sharp, piercing pain. He died 5 years ago, she said, her voice choked with emotion. A sudden illness it took him so quickly, she couldn't continue. The grief, raw and overwhelming, washed over her, stealing her breath, blurring her vision. She felt tears streaming down her cheeks, hot and stinging, a testament to the pain she had tried so hard to suppress. He remained silent, watching her, his golden eyes unwavering. She sensed his presence, a silent, powerful force that both intimidated and strangely comforted her. She felt as if he were waiting, patiently, for her to gather the strength to continue, to unravel the tangled threads of her sorrow. I haven't been the same since, she finally managed to say, her voice a broken whisper. I feel lost, empty, like a part of me died with him. She looked up, meeting his gaze, her eyes filled with a raw, unfiltered pain. I came here tonight, I don't know why. I needed to feel something, anything other than this emptiness. A flicker of something understanding, compassion, crossed his face. He took a step closer, his presence looming over her, but this time, she didn't flinch. She felt drawn to him, to his strength, to the strange, unsettling connection that seemed to bind them together. Grief is a powerful force, Lasara Rathmore, he said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. It can consume you, destroy you, but it can also transform you. He reached out, his hand hovering over her, not quite touching. She could feel the warmth emanating from him, a subtle vibration that resonated deep within her bones. The woods sense your pain, he said. They feel your sorrow. And they respond. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the clearing, coming from the shadows surrounding them. Lysara's heart leaped into her throat. She looked around, her eyes wide with fear, but she couldn't see anything. He turned his head, his gaze sweeping over the darkness, his golden eyes glowing with an almost predatory intensity. "They are here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The guardians of Holofong. They have come to assess you." Another growl, closer this time, followed by the snapping of twigs. Lysara felt a surge of panic, a primal fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She looked at the man, her eyes pleading, searching for answers, for protection. He met her gaze, his expression grim. "The pact is broken," he said, "and now the consequences must be faced." The scent of rain was suddenly overpowered by something else. Something acrid, metallic. The scent of blood. It was coming from the shadows, and it made Lysara want to retch. Chapter 5. A pact sealed in moonlight. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the air, a chilling counterpoint to the scent of impending rain. Lysara's senses were on high alert, every nerve ending screaming danger. The growls, low and guttural, echoed around the clearing, punctuated by the snapping of twigs and the rustle of unseen movement in the undergrowth. She was surrounded, trapped, by creatures she couldn't see, creatures that emanated an aura of raw, untamed power. She looked at the man, her eyes wide with fear, silently pleading for him to do something, to protect her. He stood, a statue of controlled power, his golden eyes scanning the shadows, his body radiating an almost palpable tension. He seemed different somehow. More alert, more animalistic. The subtle vibration she had felt emanating from him before was now a powerful hum, a force that resonated deep within her bones. What are they?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the darkness. He slowly raised his hand, his fingers outstretched, as if feeling the air, sensing the unseen presence that surrounded them. The growls intensified, closer now, and Lysara could feel the ground vibrate beneath her feet. Suddenly, a pair of eyes, glowing with the same eerie golden light as the man's, appeared in the shadows. Then another and another, until the clearing was ringed with luminous orbs, watching, waiting. Lysara felt a surge of panic, a primal fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She wanted to run, to scream, but she was frozen in place, trapped by the invisible force that emanated from the creatures, from the man, from the ancient oak itself. The man, she still didn't know his name, took a step forward, his body positioned between Lysara and the circling shadows. He spoke, his voice low and resonant, a language she didn't understand, but one that seemed to resonate with the very essence of the woods. The words were guttural, primal, filled with a power that made the air crackle. The growls subsided, replaced by a low, rumbling sound that seemed to be a response, a conversation between the man and the unseen creatures. Lysara watched, her heart pounding, her mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. She felt like an intruder, a trespasser in a world she didn't understand, a world governed by ancient laws and primal instincts. The conversation, if that's what it was, continued for several minutes, the man's voice shifting in tone, sometimes commanding, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening. The golden eyes in the shadows remained fixed on him, unwavering, assessing. Finally, he turned back to Lysara, his expression grim. "They are the guardians of Holofong," he said, his voice hoarse. "Werewolves. Ancient beings bound to this land, to the pact. Werewolves." The word sent a shiver of fear and fascination down Lysara's spine. The stories her grandmother had told her, the tales she had dismissed as folklore, were real. She was standing in the heart of Holofong Woods, surrounded by creatures of myth and legend, facing a reality that shattered her understanding of the world. They want to kill me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. He shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "They are curious. About you. About your connection to this place. About your sorrow." He paused, his gaze locking onto hers. "The pact is broken, Lasara Rathmore," he said. "And you are the key to mending it. Or destroying it." His words were cryptic, unsettling. What did he mean by the key? What did her sorrow have to do with anything? She felt a surge of confusion, of frustration, mixed with the ever-present fear. I don't understand," she stammered. What do you want me to do?" He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. He reached out, his hand hovering over her, not quite touching. She could feel the warmth emanating from him, the powerful energy that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. "I want you to trust me," he said, his voice a low, hypnotic murmur. "I want you to surrender to the power of Holofong, to the ancient magic that flows through this land. I want you to become one with the woods." His words sent a shiver of apprehension through her. Surrender? Become one with the woods? What did that even mean? She looked into his golden eyes, those mesmerizing orbs that seemed to hold the secrets of the ancient world, and felt a strange pull, a sense of inevitability, a feeling that she was caught in a current far stronger than herself. He lowered his hand, his fingers brushing against her cheek, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt of electricity through her. She gasped, her body reacting instinctively to his touch, to the power that emanated from him. "The pact requires a bond," he said, his voice barely audible above the rustling of the leaves, the distant rumble of thunder. "A connection between the human world and the world of Holofong. A soul bond. Soul bond." The words echoed in her mind, sending a wave of dizziness washing over her. She had heard whispers of such things, ancient rituals, forbidden magic. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else. A flicker of desire? A sense of longing? He leaned closer, his face inches from hers. She could feel his breath on her skin, warm and heavy with the scent of pine, and something else, something wild and untamed. "Will you accept?" he whispered, his golden eyes burning into hers. "Will you bind yourself to me, to Holofong, to the pact? Will you become mine?" The rain began to fall, a soft, steady drizzle that mingled with her tears. The moonlight, filtered through the clouds, cast an ethereal glow on the clearing, illuminating the ancient oak, the circling shadows, the man who stood before her, offering her a choice, a destiny, a fate she couldn't comprehend. She was on the precipice. The decision she was about to make would change everything. A drop of rain traced the same path the earlier tear had. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. Chapter 6. The Council of Shadows. The single, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acceptance of a fate she barely understood, sealed Lasara's destiny. The moment the unspoken agreement passed between them, the atmosphere in the clearing shifted. The rain, which had been a gentle drizzle, intensified, becoming a torrential downpour that lashed against the trees, mirroring the turmoil within her. The growls of the werewolf subsided, replaced by a low, expectant hum that resonated through the very ground beneath her feet. The man, she still didn't know his name, a fact that seemed increasingly surreal given the intimacy of their current situation, straightened, his golden eyes losing some of their feverish intensity, replaced by a look of satisfaction? Relief? Lasara couldn't quite decipher his expression, but she felt a subtle shift in his demeanor, a lessening of the tension that had been coiled within him. He reached out, his hand closing around hers, his grip firm but gentle. His skin was warm, almost feverishly so, and she could feel the subtle vibration emanating from him, a constant reminder of the power he wielded, of the supernatural world she had stumbled into. "Come," he said, his voice a low rumble that barely carried over the sound of the rain. "We must go to the council. They will decide the specifics of the bond." The council? The word sent a fresh wave of apprehension through her. Who were they? What power did they hold? And what did he mean by the specifics of the bond? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered, adding to the growing sense of unease that had settled deep in her gut. He led her through the downpour, his pace swift and sure, navigating the treacherous terrain with an effortless grace that defied her understanding. Lasara stumbled along behind him, her clothes soaked, her body shivering, her mind reeling from the events of the past hour. She felt disconnected, as if she were watching herself from a distance, a passive observer in a dream that was rapidly spiraling out of control. They reached a massive cave, hidden behind a curtain of cascading water, the entrance shrouded in darkness. The air here was heavy with the scent of damp earth, moss, and that ever-present musky odor that she now associated with the werewolves, with the man who led her, with the very essence of Holofong. As they entered the cave, the sound of the rain faded, replaced by a low, murmuring sound that seemed to emanate from the depths of the earth. Torches, flickering along the walls, cast an eerie, dancing light, revealing a vast chamber filled with beings. Lasara's breath caught in her throat. They were like him, tall and powerfully built, their eyes glowing with that same unnatural golden light. Some were dressed in similar dark clothing, leather and furs that blended seamlessly with the shadows. Others were partially shifted, their human forms blending with the features of wolves' elongated limbs, sharp claws, fangs bared in silent snarls. They were all watching her, their golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She felt a surge of primal fear, a deep, instinctive awareness of being surrounded by predators, by beings far more powerful than herself. The man, in some strange, inexplicable way, led her to the center of the chamber, to a raised platform where 3 figures sat, their forms shrouded in shadow. These were clearly the leaders, the council, their presence radiating an even more intense power than the others. He stopped before the platform, his grip on her hand tightening. He spoke, again in that guttural, primal language she didn't understand, his voice echoing through the chamber. The 3 figures on the platform responded, their voices deep and resonant, their words filled with an ancient authority. The conversation, if that's what it was, continued for several minutes, the man's voice shifting in tone, sometimes deferential, sometimes challenging, sometimes pleading. Lasara watched, her heart pounding, her mind racing, trying to decipher the meaning of the exchange, to understand the fate that was being decided for her. Finally, one of the figures on the platform, a woman with long, silver hair and eyes that glowed with an almost blinding light, spoke in English, her voice surprisingly gentle, but laced with an undercurrent of steel. "Lasara Rathmore," she said, her gaze sweeping over Lasara, assessing, judging. "You have broken the ancient pact, but you have also offered yourself as a means of restoring it. A brave act, or a foolish one?" Lasara swallowed, her throat dry. She found her voice, though it trembled slightly. I didn't know about the pact," she said. I needed to." The woman cut her off with a wave of her hand. "Intentions matter little," she said. "Actions are what define us. And your actions have consequences." She paused, her gaze locking onto Lasara's. "The pact requires a bond," she said. "A connection between the human world and the world of Holofong. A union. Union." The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Lasara looked at the man beside her, his face impassive, his golden eyes unreadable. She felt a surge of what? Fear? Excitement? Resignation? She didn't know. She had made her choice, accepted her fate, and now she had to face the consequences. The woman on the platform continued. "The bond will be physical," she said, "and spiritual. It will bind you to Holofong, to its magic, to its protector." She gestured towards the man beside Lasara. "This is Rorik," she said. "Alpha of the Holofong pack. He will be your mate, your guardian, your everything." Rorik. Finally a name. Lasara looked at him, at Rorik, and felt a strange sense of inevitability. She had known, from the moment she saw him, that her life would never be the same. She had known, deep down, that she was destined to be with him, to be a part of his world, a world she was only just beginning to understand. The council elder stood, and with a sweeping gesture that took in the whole chamber, announced, "The binding begins at dawn." Chapter 7. Whispers of Rebellion. The pronouncement echoed through the cavern. The binding begins at dawn, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Lasara felt a cold dread settle in the pit of her stomach, a sense of finality that both terrified and strangely exhilarated her.
Dawn.
Just hours away. A lifetime away. Rorik, his name now a tangible anchor in the swirling chaos of her new reality, squeezed her hand, a silent reassurance, a gesture that spoke volumes despite his stoic demeanor. He led her away from the council platform, through the throng of werewolves, their golden eyes following them, curious, assessing, some hostile. He guided her to a smaller chamber, carved out of the rock, a private space that offered a semblance of respite from the overwhelming intensity of the main cavern. A fire crackled in a hearth, casting a warm, flickering light that danced across the rough stone walls. Furs were piled on a makeshift bed, offering a promise of comfort, of warmth, in this cold, alien world. Rorik released her hand, his touch lingering for a moment, sending a shiver through her. He gestured towards the bed. Rest, he said, his voice low and gravelly. You will need your strength. Lasara hesitated, her mind racing. She wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, to demand explanations, to understand the nature of the bond that was about to bind them together, to know what her future held. But she also felt exhausted, drained, overwhelmed by the events of the past few hours. She lowered herself onto the furs, the softness a welcome contrast to the hard stone floor. She watched as Rorik moved around the chamber, his movements fluid and graceful, his presence filling the space, dominating it. He added wood to the fire, the flames leaping higher, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He checked the entrance to the chamber, ensuring their privacy, their safety. He was a creature of contradictions, she realized. A powerful alpha, a ruthless protector, a being capable of inspiring both fear and fascination. He was also, she sensed, a deeply solitary creature, carrying the weight of his responsibilities, of the ancient pact, of the survival of his pack, on his broad shoulders. He turned to her, his golden eyes meeting hers across the flickering firelight. He saw the questions in her eyes, the fear, the uncertainty. He walked towards her, his movements slow and deliberate, and knelt beside the bed, his presence close, but not threatening. I know you have questions, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. And I will answer them. In time. But for now, trust me.
Trust.
It was a fragile thing, easily broken, hard to earn. And yet, she felt a strange, inexplicable pull towards him, a sense of connection that defied logic and reason. She had accepted his offer, bound herself to him, to Holofong, and now she had to trust that he would guide her, protect her, through this new, terrifying reality. What will happen at dawn? She asked, her voice a strained whisper. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers, not quite touching. She could feel the warmth emanating from him, the subtle vibration that was a constant reminder of his power. The binding is a ritual, he said. An ancient ceremony that will connect us, body and soul. It will change you. It will make you one of us. One of us. The words sent a shiver of apprehension, but also a flicker of excitement through her. She had always felt different, set apart, and now, she was about to become something more. Something other. Will it hurt? She asked, the question a childish whisper, betraying her vulnerability. He smiled, a rare, fleeting expression that softened his features, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the alpha, the creature beneath the protector. There will be discomfort, he said. But I will be with you. I will protect you. I will guide you. He leaned closer, his face inches from hers. She could feel his breath on her skin, warm and heavy with the scent of pine and something else, something wild and untamed, that stirred something deep within her. The bond is not just a physical union, Lasara, he whispered, his golden eyes burning into hers. It is a merging of souls, of minds, of hearts. It will connect us in ways you cannot yet comprehend. It will make us stronger. Together. His words resonated with a power that both terrified and intrigued her. She felt a strange sense of anticipation, of longing, a yearning for a connection she had never known, a connection that promised to fill the emptiness that had haunted her for so long. But even as she felt that pull, a whisper of dissent, of rebellion, stirred within her. This was her life, her body, her soul. And while she had accepted this fate, she would not surrender completely. She would retain her identity, her strength, her will. She met his gaze, her chin lifted, her eyes filled with a newfound determination. "I will be your mate, Rorik," she said, her voice firmer now, stronger. "But I will not be your possession. I will be your partner. Your equal." He studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes searching hers, assessing her. Then, a slow smile spread across his face, a smile that held a hint of respect? Admiration? "I would expect nothing less, Lysara Rathmore," he said, his voice a low, approving rumble. "You are Holofong now, and Holofong breeds strength." Outside, a distant howl, almost mournful, sliced through the sounds of the storm. It was answered by another, and another, closer this time. Something was happening. Chapter 8. The Dance of Deception. The answering howls, closer and more urgent, cut through the quiet intimacy of the chamber, shattering the fragile truce that had settled between Lysara and Rorik. His eyes, moments before filled with a rare warmth, snapped back to their predatory alertness. He rose swiftly, his movements fluid and economical, his body radiating a tension that mirrored the growing unease in the air. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice sharp and clipped, leaving no room for argument. "I will return." He was gone before Lysara could utter a word, disappearing into the main cavern with a speed that defied her understanding. She was left alone, the fire her only companion, the silence punctuated by the distant, unsettling sounds of the werewolves, of something unfolding. She sat up, her heart pounding against her ribs, her mind racing. What was happening? Why the sudden shift in mood? Was the council in danger? Was Rorik in danger? And what about her? Was she safe here alone? In this strange, alien world? She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the chill that had settled deep in her bones, a chill that had little to do with the temperature of the cave and everything to do with the fear that gnawed at her. She felt vulnerable, exposed, a pawn in a game she didn't understand, a game with rules she didn't know. She rose from the bed, her legs shaky, her body protesting the sudden movement. She paced the small chamber, her restless energies seeking an outlet, a release. She needed to do something, to know something, to regain some semblance of control over her own fate. She examined the chamber, her eyes searching for any clue, any hint of what was happening outside. The walls were rough, unadorned. The only decoration the flickering firelight that cast dancing shadows, distorting the familiar shapes, creating an illusion of movement, of unseen eyes watching her. She noticed a small crevice in the wall, hidden behind a pile of furs. Curiosity, a desperate need to distract herself from her fear, propelled her forward. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold stone, and felt a slight draft, a subtle movement of air. She pushed aside the furs, revealing a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The whispers started then, faint at first, almost imperceptible, like the rustling of leaves, the murmur of the wind. But as she listened, she realized they were voices, speaking in that guttural, primal language she didn't understand, but whose tone, whose urgency she could feel. She hesitated, her fear warring with her curiosity, with her need to know. She glanced back at the entrance to the chamber, at the empty space where Rorik had stood, his command echoing in her mind, "Stay here." But she couldn't. She couldn't stay here, alone, in the dark, ignorant of the events that were unfolding around her, events that would shape her future, her very existence. She had to know. She had to understand. She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve, and squeezed through the narrow passage, her body scraping against the rough stone. The passage wound downwards, twisting and turning, leading her deeper into the heart of the cave, closer to the source of the whispers, of the unsettling sounds that had drawn her in. She emerged into a hidden alcove, overlooking the main cavern. From this vantage point, she could see the entire scene unfolding below, a scene that made her blood run cold. The werewolves were gathered, not in a circle of council, but in a chaotic, agitated mass. Some were fully shifted, their forms sleek and powerful, their eyes glowing with an almost feral intensity. Others were partially shifted, their human features distorted, their claws extended, their fangs bared in snarls. Rorik stood in the center, his form radiating power, his voice booming through the cavern, trying to control the unrest, to quell the rising tide of rebellion. Lysara's eyes focused, now, picking out a few of the words Rorik was saying, and with horror, some that were being thrown back at him. She didn't know the language, but the tone made it all clear. They were arguing heatedly about her, and about the binding. A tall, muscular werewolf, his fur a dark, almost black shade, stepped forward, challenging Rorik, his voice filled with contempt, with hatred. This was clearly the source of the unrest, the leader of the dissent. Lysara watched, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat, as the two werewolves faced each other, their bodies tense, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy, a sense of impending violence, of a conflict that was about to explode. Rorik was speaking, trying to calm the pack, but the other wolf interrupted, spitting words she couldn't understand, that were full of rage. The language may have been alien, but she was beginning to grasp some meaning. Rorik was defending the bond. The other wolf was demanding her death. The sun was going to rise soon. Very soon. Chapter 9. The Price of Protection. The scene below was a maelstrom of barely controlled fury. Rorik, his voice a commanding roar that echoed through the cavern, was struggling to maintain order against the rising tide of dissent. The dark-furred werewolf, his challenger, was clearly inciting the pack, his words dripping with venom, his eyes blazing with a hatred that was directed squarely at Lysara. She clung to the shadows of the alcove, her body trembling, her mind reeling. She was the cause of this conflict, the catalyst for this potential rebellion. Her presence, her acceptance of the bond, had fractured the pack, divided them into factions, threatening to tear apart the ancient order of Holofong. She watched, mesmerized and terrified, as Rorik and the dark-furred werewolf circled each other, their bodies tense, their movements mirroring the dance of predators, of rivals locked in a battle for dominance. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy, a sense of impending violence, of a conflict that was about to escalate beyond words. She tried to decipher their guttural exchanges, her limited understanding of their language piecing together fragments of meaning, painting a chilling picture. The dark-furred werewolf, whose name she now knew was Kale, was accusing Rorik of weakness, of betraying the pack, of putting his own desires above the safety of Holofong. He was demanding Lysara's death, claiming that she was a threat, a contaminant, a violation of the ancient laws. Rorik, in turn, was defending his decision, arguing that the bond was necessary, that it was the only way to restore the balance, to appease the ancient spirits, to ensure the survival of the pack. He spoke of Lysara's connection to the woods, of her sorrow, of her power. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The pack was restless, agitated, their loyalty divided. Kale's influence was strong, his hatred infectious, his call for blood resonating with a primal instinct that was difficult to resist. Lysara felt a surge of despair, of guilt. She had brought this upon them, upon Rorik, upon Holofong. Her desire for solace, for escape, had led her to this place, to this conflict, to this precipice. She wanted to scream, to shout, to tell them to stop, to tell them that she would leave, that she would undo the bond, that she would sacrifice herself to restore their peace. But she knew it was too late. The wheels were in motion, the forces unleashed, the ancient laws invoked. She was caught in a web of fate, of destiny, and there was no escape. Suddenly, Kale lunged, his claws extended, his fangs bared in a savage snarl. Rorik met his attack, his own form shifting, transforming, becoming more wolf-like. The two werewolves clashed, a blur of fur and muscle, their growls and snarls echoing through the cavern, a terrifying symphony of violence. Lysara watched, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat, as the two alphas fought, their battle a brutal dance of power and aggression. She felt helpless, a spectator in a conflict that was both personal and epic. She saw Rorik falter, a flicker of pain crossing his face as Kale's claws raked across his shoulder, drawing blood. The sight of his blood, dark and viscous, sent a jolt of fear and something else through her. A surge of protectiveness, of loyalty. She realized, with a chilling certainty, that she was no longer a passive observer. She was connected to Rorik, to Holofong, to this conflict. She was a part of this world, a part of this pack, and she had a role to play, a responsibility to fulfill. She had to do something. She had to help him. But what? How? She was just a human, a woman weakened by grief, facing a world of supernatural power, of ancient laws, of creatures she barely understood. She looked around the alcove, her eyes searching for anything that could help her, that could give her an advantage, a weapon, a tool. She saw nothing but rock, shadows, and the faint, flickering light of the torches in the main cavern. Then, she remembered the ancient oak, the heart of Holofong, the place where the pact had been forged, the place where Rorik had drawn strength, where he had told her she would find her own. An idea, a desperate gamble, a flicker of hope, sparked in her mind. She had to get back to the clearing, to the tree, to the source of the ancient magic that flowed through this land. She had to connect, to tap into that power, to find the strength she needed to help Rorik, to save him, to save herself. She slipped back into the narrow passage, her body moving with a newfound urgency, a desperate determination. She had to hurry. The sounds of the battle below, the growls, the snarls, the clash of claws on flesh, spurred her on, a constant reminder of the stakes, of the price of failure. Dawn, and the binding that the pack fought over, was approaching fast. She had to reach the heart of Holofong. Rorik's life, and her own, hung on her actions. Chapter 10. Heartbeats in the Dark. The narrow passage seemed to stretch on forever, a claustrophobic tunnel that mirrored the turmoil in Lysara's mind. She scrambled through the darkness, her hands and knees scraping against the rough stone, her breath coming in ragged gasps, driven by a desperate urgency to reach the clearing, to reach the ancient oak, to reach Rorik. The sounds of the battle, though muffled by the stone walls, followed her, a constant, terrifying reminder of the stakes, of the violence that was unfolding below. She could hear the clash of claws, the snarls and growls, the pained cries of the werewolves, and her heart ached with a fear that was both primal and personal. She had to hurry. She had to get to the heart of Holofong, to tap into the ancient magic, to find the strength she needed to help Rorik, to save him from Kale's wrath, from the rebellion that threatened to tear apart the pack. She emerged from the passage, back into the small chamber where she had rested, where Rorik had told her to stay, where he had promised to protect her. The fire had burned low, the embers casting a faint, flickering glow that barely illuminated the space. The chamber felt empty, abandoned, a stark contrast to the warmth and safety it had offered just hours before. She didn't hesitate. She rushed to the entrance, pushing aside the heavy furs that concealed it, and stepped back into the main cavern. The scene that greeted her was even more chaotic than before. The werewolves were no longer just fighting amongst themselves. They were turning on each other, friend against friend, brother against brother, the ancient bonds of loyalty and kinship shattered by Kale's influence, by the conflict over Lysara's fate. The cavern was a maelstrom of fur and claws, of snarls and growls, of blood and death. Lysara felt a wave of nausea, of horror, at the sight of the carnage, at the realization that she was the cause of this destruction, of this tragedy. She spotted Rorik, fighting desperately against a group of werewolves, his body covered in wounds, his movements slowing, his strength failing. Kale was nowhere to be seen, but his influence, his hatred, was palpable, fueling the chaos, driving the pack to madness. Lasara knew she couldn't stay here. She had to get out, to escape the carnage, to reach the clearing, to find the ancient oak. She pushed her way through the throng of fighting werewolves, her body buffeted by their powerful forms, her senses overwhelmed by the scent of blood, of fear, of rage. She reached the entrance to the cave, the curtain of cascading water a welcome sight, a promise of escape, of hope. She plunged through the waterfall, the cold water shocking her senses, washing away some of the blood and grime, cleansing her, preparing her for what was to come. She ran, her lungs burning, her legs aching, her body screaming in protest. But she didn't stop. She followed the path, the familiar path that had led her to this place, to this destiny, to this nightmare. She reached the clearing, the heart of Hollowfong, the ancient oak looming before her, a beacon of hope, a source of power. The rain had stopped, the clouds parting, revealing the first faint rays of dawn, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped her just hours before. She stumbled towards the tree, her body exhausted, her spirit drained, but her determination unwavering. She reached out, her hand touching the rough bark, feeling the ancient energy, the primal power that flowed through the wood, through the earth, through her. She closed her eyes, her mind reaching out, seeking a connection, a link to the ancient magic, to the spirit of Hollowfong, to the source. She felt a surge of energy, a warmth that spread through her body, filling her with a newfound strength, a sense of belonging. She opened her eyes and saw him. Rorik. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, his body battered and bruised, his clothes torn, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of pain and relief. He had followed her. He had escaped the carnage, the chaos, the rebellion. He had come for her. He took a step towards her, his movements slow and hesitant, as if he were unsure of his welcome, unsure of her reaction. "Lasara," he said, his voice hoarse, his breath ragged. "You came back." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears, tears of relief, of gratitude, of love. "I had to," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to help you." He reached out, his hand touching hers, his grip firm but gentle. His skin was warm, almost feverishly so, and she could feel the subtle vibration emanating from him, a constant reminder of his power, of his connection to her. "You saved me," he said, his voice filled with awe, with wonder. "You tapped into the power of Hollowfong. You became one of us." The sun crested the horizon. Lasara could feel the warmth spreading through her, a new warmth, a new power. It was now. The binding. Her heartbeat. And his. In the darkness, they were two. In the light, they were going to be one. Chapter 11. The Unveiling of Secrets. The first rays of dawn painted the sky with a breathtaking tapestry of gold and crimson, illuminating the clearing with an ethereal glow. The ancient oak, its branches reaching towards the heavens like the arms of a benevolent god, stood sentinel, its gnarled trunk a testament to centuries of history, of magic, of secrets. Lasara and Rorik stood facing each other, their hands intertwined, their bodies close, their eyes locked in a gaze that spoke of shared fear, shared hope, shared destiny. The binding, the ancient ritual that would connect them, body and soul, was about to begin. Lasara felt a surge of apprehension, of uncertainty, but also a sense of anticipation, of excitement. She was about to become something more, something other, a part of a world she had only just begun to understand, a world of ancient magic, of primal power, of werewolves. Rorik squeezed her hand, his touch a silent reassurance, a promise of protection, of guidance. He began to chant, his voice low and resonant, a language she didn't understand, but one that resonated with the very essence of Hollowfong, of the ancient pact, of the bond that was about to bind them together. As he chanted, the air around them shimmered, the light intensified, the ancient oak seemed to pulse with a vibrant energy. Lasara felt a warmth spread through her body, starting from her heart, spreading outwards, reaching every limb, every nerve ending, filling her with a power she had never known before. She felt different, transformed, as if a part of her that had been dormant, hidden, had awakened, had come alive. She felt stronger, more connected to the earth, to the woods, to Rorik. The chanting intensified, Rorik's voice rising in pitch, his body radiating an almost blinding light. Lysara felt herself being pulled into the vortex of his power, of the ancient magic, of the bond. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the sensation, trusting in Rorik, trusting in fate. She felt a sharp, searing pain, a momentary agony that made her gasp, her body arching in response. But then, the pain subsided, replaced by a feeling of wholeness, of completion, of unity. She opened her eyes and saw everything. The world around her was vibrant, alive, filled with colors she had never seen before, with sounds she had never heard before, with scents she had never smelled before. She could feel the heartbeat of the earth, the pulse of the trees, the flow of the ancient magic that connected everything, that bound everything together. She looked at Rorik and saw him. Not just the alpha, the protector, the werewolf, but the man beneath the surface, the soul within the creature. She saw his pain, his loneliness, his burden of responsibility, his love for his pack, for Holofong, for her. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his features, revealing a glimpse of the beauty, the vulnerability, that he kept hidden from the world. "Welcome, Lysara," he said, his voice a soft whisper that resonated with the power of the bond, of their connection. "Welcome to Holofong. Welcome home." He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, a gentle, tender kiss that sealed their union, their bond, their destiny. It was a kiss that spoke of promises, of protection, of love. But even as they kissed, a shadow fell across the clearing, a darkness that disrupted the peace, the serenity, the magic.
Kale.
He stood at the edge of the clearing, his form fully shifted, a massive black wolf, his eyes glowing with a malevolent red light, his fangs bared in a savage snarl. He was not alone. Several other werewolves, their forms also shifted, their loyalty to Kale, to his hatred evident in their posture, in their aggression. Rorik broke the kiss, his body instantly tense, his golden eyes narrowing, his hand reaching for hers, protectively. "They have come to challenge the bond," he said, his voice grim, his words a chilling pronouncement of the battle that was about to begin. "They have come to kill you." Lysara felt a surge of fear, but it was different this time. It was not the paralyzing fear of the helpless human, but the fierce, protective fear of the bonded mate, of the werewolf. She stood tall, her chin lifted, her eyes blazing with a newfound power, a power that came from the bond, from Holofong, from Rorik. "Then let them come," she said, her voice firm, her words echoing with the ancient magic that flowed through her, through them. "We will fight. Together." Kale let out a howl. It was a challenge, and a promise of pain. The dawn and the binding had come, but so had the reckoning. Chapter 12. A Trail of Betrayal. The challenge, a guttural howl that ripped through the dawn-kissed air, hung heavy with the promise of violence. Kale, a hulking silhouette of muscle and menace, stood poised at the edge of the clearing, his pack arrayed behind him, a phalanx of teeth and claws. Lysara felt Rorik's grip tighten on her hand, a silent communication of the danger, of the imminent battle, of the betrayal. For it was betrayal, she realized, a deep, visceral wound inflicted upon the very heart of Holofong. Kale, once a trusted lieutenant, a loyal member of the pack, had succumbed to his own ambition, his own hatred, and now stood poised to tear apart the ancient order, to destroy the bond that had just been forged, to kill her. Lysara felt a surge of anger, a righteous fury that burned away the last vestiges of her fear, replacing it with a fierce determination to fight, to survive, to protect Rorik, to protect their bond. She stepped forward, her body radiating a newfound power, a power that came from the binding, from the ancient magic of Holofong, from her connection to Rorik. She felt different, transformed, not just physically, but spiritually. She was no longer just Lysara Rathmore, the grieving widow, the woman who had stumbled into a world she didn't understand. She was something more, something other. She was Holofong. Kale, she said, her voice amplified by the magic that flowed through her, echoing across the clearing, reaching the ears of every werewolf present, challenging his authority, his rebellion. You have betrayed your pack. You have betrayed your alpha. You have betrayed the pact. Kale snarled, his red eyes blazing with hatred, with contempt. You are the betrayal. Human, he spat, his voice a guttural growl that dripped with venom. You are the contaminant. You are the abomination. You do not belong here. She does belong here, Rorik interjected, his voice a commanding roar that silenced Kale's pack, momentarily. She is bound to me. She is bound to Holofong. She is one of us. Kale laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the clearing. A human? One of us? You have lost your mind, Rorik. You have been blinded by your lust. You have betrayed everything we stand for. He turned to his pack, his voice rising in pitch, inciting them, fueling their rage, their bloodlust. Kill her, he commanded. Kill the human. Kill the abomination. And then we will deal with Rorik. The pack hesitated, their loyalty divided, their instincts warring. They were bound to obey their alpha, Rorik, but Kale's influence, his hatred, his promise of a return to the old ways, was strong, seductive, a siren song that appealed to their primal nature. Rorik stepped forward, his form shifting, transforming, becoming more wolf-like. His claws extended, his fangs bared, his golden eyes blazing with a righteous fury that mirrored Lysara's own. You will not touch her, Kale, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that promised pain, that promised death. She is under my protection. She is my mate. The two alphas faced each other, their bodies tense, their muscles coiled, their eyes locked in a battle of wills, a prelude to the physical battle that was about to erupt. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy, a sense of impending violence, of a conflict that would determine the fate of Holofong, of the pack, of Lysara and Rorik. Lysara felt a surge of connection to Rorik, a deep, visceral bond that transcended words, that transcended understanding. She could feel his anger, his fear, his determination, and he could feel hers. She stepped forward, standing beside him, shoulder to shoulder, her own form shifting, subtly but undeniably. She felt a surge of power, of wildness, coursing through her veins, transforming her, empowering her. Her senses were heightened, her reflexes sharpened, her strength amplified. We fight together, Rorik, she said, her voice firm, her words a promise of vow. We are one. We are Holofong. Kale and his wolves attacked. It was brutal, a whirlwind of fury and claws. But Rorik and Lysara were ready. As the wolves lunged, a piercing, unfamiliar howl echoed through the trees. Not Rorik's, not Kale's. It was Lysara. Chapter 13. The Gathering Storm. Lysara's howl, a primal cry that ripped through the air, was unlike anything she had ever experienced, unlike anything she had ever imagined. It was a sound born of the ancient magic of Holofong, of her newfound connection to Rorik, to the pack, to the land itself. It was a sound of defiance, of power, of warning. The attacking werewolves hesitated, momentarily stunned by the unexpected sound, by the sheer force of the energy that emanated from Lysara. It was a moment of reprieve, a brief pause in the brutal onslaught, a chance for Lysara and Rorik to regroup, to prepare. Rorik looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of surprise, admiration, and pride. He had known she was strong, that she had a connection to Holofong, but he had not anticipated this transformation, this power. You are amazing, he said, his voice a low rumble that barely carried over the renewed sounds of the battle, of the snarls and growls, of the clash of claws on flesh. Lysara didn't answer, her focus narrowed, her senses heightened, her body poised for action. She could feel the magic coursing through her veins, empowering her, transforming her, making her more than human, more than werewolf. She was something new, something unique, a bridge between two worlds, a force to be reckoned with. Kale, recovering from his initial surprise, renewed his attack, his fury amplified by Lysara's defiance, by her power. He lunged at Rorik, his claws extended, his fangs bared in a savage snarl, his intent clear: to kill the Alpha, to destroy the bond, to claim Holofong for himself. Rorik met his attack, his own form shifting further, becoming more wolf-like, his movements fluid and graceful, his strength amplified by the ancient magic that flowed through him, through the land, through Lysara. The two alphas clashed, a blur of fur and muscle, their battle a brutal dance of power and aggression, a struggle for dominance, for survival. Lysara watched, her heart pounding, her breath caught in her throat, her body tensed, ready to intervene, to help Rorik, to protect him. But she also knew that she couldn't just stand by and watch. She had a role to play, a responsibility to fulfill. She was a part of this fight, a part of this pack, a part of Holofong. She moved, her movements swift and sure, her senses guiding her, her instincts taking over. She attacked Kale's pack, the werewolves who had betrayed Rorik, who had betrayed the ancient pact, who had threatened her life. She fought with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, her claws raking across fur and flesh, her teeth, her fangs sinking into muscle and bone, her howls echoing through the clearing, challenging Kale's authority, inspiring Rorik's loyalists, disrupting the rebellion. She was a force of nature, a whirlwind of fury and power, a protector of her mate, of her pack, of her home. She fought with the strength of Holofong, with the ancient magic that flowed through her veins, with the love that bound her to Rorik, to his world. The battle raged, a chaotic melee of fur and claws, of snarls and growls, of blood and pain. Lysara fought alongside Rorik, their movements synchronized, their bond strengthening with each passing moment, their connection deepening, their love growing. But even as they fought, Lysara felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition of something wrong, something amiss. The battle was too chaotic, too disorganized. Kale's attack, though brutal, seemed unfocused, his strategy flawed. She realized, with a chilling certainty, that this was not just a rebellion. It was a distraction, a diversion. Something else was happening, something hidden, something sinister. She looked at Rorik, her eyes meeting his across the battlefield, her mind reaching out to his, their bond allowing them to communicate without words, without sound. Something's wrong, she thought, her message clear, urgent, a warning that transcended the chaos of the battle. I know, he responded, his thought equally clear, equally urgent. Kale is not fighting to win. He is fighting to delay. Delay? She questioned. Delay for what? Rorik didn't answer. His eyes widened, his body tensed, his senses alert. He had realized something terrifying. The council, he thought, his message filled with dread, with horror. He's going after the council. The dawn sky began to be streaked with black smoke. Chapter 14. Echoes of War. The realization hit Lysara like a physical blow. The council. Kale wasn't just trying to kill her and overthrow Rorik. He was aiming for something far more ambitious, far more devastating. He was targeting the very heart of Holofong, the ancient guardians of the pact, the source of their power, their stability. The black smoke rising in the distance, a stark and ominous symbol against the brightening dawn sky, confirmed their fears. Kale's attack on the clearing, the brutal battle they were engaged in, was nothing more than a diversion, a distraction to draw Rorik and his loyalists away from the cave, leaving the council vulnerable, exposed, unprotected. Lysara felt a surge of rage, a cold, focused fury that burned away any lingering fear, any lingering doubt. Kale had underestimated her. He had underestimated Rorik. He had underestimated the power of their bond, of their connection to Holofong, of their love. We have to stop him, she said, her voice amplified by the magic that flowed through her, reaching Rorik across the battlefield, cutting through the chaos of the fighting, the snarls and growls, the screams. Rorik nodded, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce determination that mirrored her own. He knew what they had to do. They had to abandon this fight, this distraction, and race to the cave, to protect the council, to save Holofong. But it wouldn't be easy. They were surrounded by Kale's pack, by werewolves who were still caught in the throes of his rebellion, of his hatred. They would have to fight their way out, to break free from the chaos, to reach the cave before it was too late. Rorik let out a deafening roar, a command that resonated with the authority of the Alpha, with the power of Holofong, with the ancient pact. It was a call to his loyalists, a signal to disengage, to regroup, to follow him. The werewolves who were still loyal to Rorik, those who had not succumbed to Kale's influence, responded to his call, breaking away from the fighting, forming a protective circle around him and Lasara, their bodies tense, their claws extended, their fangs bared, ready to defend their alpha, their mate. "We go now," Rorik said, his voice low and urgent, his eyes scanning the battlefield, assessing the situation, planning their escape. "We fight our way out. We go to the council. We save Holofong." They charged, a unified force, a pack bound together by loyalty, by love, by destiny. Rorik and Lasara led the way, their movements synchronized, their bond a source of strength, of power. They fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves, their claws and fangs tearing through fur and flesh, their howls echoing through the clearing, challenging Kale's authority, defying his rebellion. Kale, realizing that his plan was unraveling, that his distraction had failed, that Rorik and Lasara were escaping, let out a frustrated roar, a cry of rage and despair. He tried to intercept them, to block their path, but it was too late. Rorik and Lasara, surrounded by their loyalists, broke through Kale's ranks, leaving the chaos of the battlefield behind, racing towards the cave, towards the council, towards their destiny. The run was a blur, a desperate race against time, a test of endurance, of will. Lasara felt the magic of Holofong coursing through her veins, empowering her, pushing her beyond her limits, giving her the strength she needed to keep going, to keep fighting, to survive. They reached the cave, the entrance shrouded in black smoke, the air thick with the scent of burning wood, of fear, of death. They could hear the sounds of fighting coming from within, the snarls and growls, the clash of claws on stone, the screams. Rorik didn't hesitate. He plunged into the darkness, Lasara by his side, their loyalists following close behind, ready to face whatever awaited them, ready to defend the council, to defend Holofong. The battle within the cave, to save the elders and the ancient magic, had already begun. And Kale was winning. Chapter 15. The Siege of Holofong. The interior of the cave was a scene of utter chaos. Torches had been overturned, casting flickering, erratic shadows that danced across the walls, obscuring the violence, amplifying the horror. The air was thick with smoke, with the stench of blood, with the guttural sounds of battle, of werewolves locked in mortal combat. Kale's forces, bolstered by his surprise attack, had gained a significant advantage. They had breached the council's defenses, overwhelmed the few guards who had remained, and were now pressing their assault on the three elders, who were huddled together on the raised platform, their forms radiating a weakened, flickering light, a sign of their dwindling power, of their vulnerability. Rorik roared, a sound of pure rage and fury, a challenge to Kale, a call to his loyalists, a promise of retribution. He charged into the fray, Lasara by his side, their bond a source of strength, of unity, their movements synchronized, their attacks coordinated, their love a weapon against the darkness. The loyalist werewolves followed, engaging Kale's forces, the battle resuming with renewed intensity, a desperate struggle for the fate of Holofong, for the survival of the council, for the future of the pack. Lasara fought with a ferocity she had never known before, her claws and fangs tearing through fur and flesh, her howls echoing through the cavern, challenging Kale's authority, defying his rebellion. She was no longer just a human, no longer just a grieving widow. She was Holofong. She was a protector. She was a warrior. She saw Kale, standing near the council platform, his eyes fixed on the elders, his body radiating a malevolent energy, his intent clear, to destroy them, to seize their power, to rule Holofong. She moved towards him, her movements swift and sure, her senses guiding her, her instincts taking over. She had to stop him. She had to protect the council. She had to save Holofong. But Kale was not alone. Several of his most loyal, most powerful werewolves guarded him, forming a protective barrier, a wall of fur and claws, a challenge to anyone who dared approach. Lasara didn't hesitate. She attacked, her claws raking across fur, her fangs sinking into flesh, her howls disrupting their formation, creating an opening, a chance. Rorik saw her, understood her intent, and joined her attack, his own form shifting further, becoming more wolf-like, his strength amplified by the ancient magic that flowed through him, through the bond, through Lasara. Together, they fought their way through Kale's guards, a whirlwind of fury and power, a force of nature unleashed, a testament to their love, to their bond, to their destiny. They reached Kale, the two alphas facing each other, their bodies tense, their muscles coiled, their eyes locked in a battle of wills, a prelude to the final, decisive confrontation. "You cannot win, Kale," Rorik said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that echoed through the cavern, silencing the sounds of the battle, focusing all attention on the two leaders, on the climax of the conflict. Kale laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that dripped with venom. "I have already won." "Rorik," he spat. "The council is weakened. Holofong is divided. Your human mate is nothing but a distraction." He lunged, his claws extended, his fangs bared in a savage snarl, his attack swift and brutal, aimed at Rorik's throat, a killing blow. But Lasara intervened. She stepped in front of Rorik, shielding him with her body, her own claws and fangs meeting Kale's attack, deflecting his blow, protecting her mate. She was not as strong as Kale, not as experienced, but she was fierce, determined, fueled by the power of the bond, by the ancient magic of Holofong, by her love for Rorik. She held her ground, her body trembling with the effort, her muscles screaming in protest, but she did not yield. She would not let Kale harm Rorik. She would not let him destroy Holofong. She would fight. The clash echoed. Kale was stronger, yes. But Lasara had something he did not. Something ancient and pure and powerful. The combined magic of the elders, channeled through her, pulsed. Kale recoiled. It wasn't enough to defeat him, but it was a start. Chapter 16. Broken bonds, forged alliances. The unexpected surge of power that emanated from Lasara, the combined magic of the elders channeled through her newly formed bond, stunned Kale, forcing him to recoil, to reassess his strategy, to acknowledge the threat she posed. It was a brief reprieve, a momentary shift in the balance of power, but it was enough. It gave Rorik the opening he needed, the chance to counterattack, to reclaim the advantage. He lunged, his movements swift and precise, his claws raking across Kale's flank, drawing blood, forcing the rebel alpha to stumble, to falter. The two werewolves circled each other, their bodies tense, their eyes locked in a deadly dance, a struggle for dominance, for survival. Lasara, though weakened by the effort of channeling the Elder's magic, remained vigilant, her senses alert, her body poised to intervene, to help Rorik, to protect him. She could feel the connection between them, the bond that strengthened them, that united them, that made them more than the sum of their parts. But the battle was far from over. Kale, though wounded, was still a formidable opponent, his rage fueling his strength, his ambition driving him forward, his hatred a weapon against them. And his remaining followers, though shaken by Lasara's display of power, were still fighting, still loyal to their rebel leader. The fighting within the cave continued, a chaotic melee of fur and claws, of snarls and growls, of blood and pain. But the tide was beginning to turn. Rorik's loyalists, inspired by his leadership, by Lasara's courage, by the magic that flowed through them, were gaining ground, pushing back Kale's forces, reclaiming the cave, protecting the council. Lasara saw an opportunity. While Rorik and Kale were locked in their deadly duel, she turned her attention to the remaining rebel werewolves, those who were still fighting, still resisting. She knew that she couldn't defeat them all, not alone, but she could influence them. She could appeal to their sense of loyalty, of kinship, of pack. She raised her voice, her howl echoing through the cavern, a sound that was both powerful and pleading. It was a sound that spoke of the ancient pact, of the bonds that united them, of the true spirit of Holofong.
Stop!
She cried, her voice amplified by the magic that flowed through her, reaching the ears of every werewolf present, cutting through the chaos of the battle, demanding their attention. This is not the way. Kale has betrayed us. He has betrayed the pact. He has betrayed Holofong. Some of the rebel werewolves hesitated, their movements slowing, their eyes flickering with doubt, with uncertainty. They could feel the truth in her words, the power in her voice, the magic in her howl. They could sense the ancient bonds that connected them, the ties of loyalty and kinship that Kale had tried to sever, that he had broken. Others, however, remained steadfast in their rebellion, their hatred blinding them, their loyalty to Kale unwavering, their bloodlust unsated. They continued to fight, to attack, to kill. Lasara knew that she couldn't reach them all, but she could reach some.
And that was enough.
She focused her attention on those who were wavering, those who were questioning, those who were ready to change sides. She spoke to them, not with words, but with feelings, with emotions, with the power of the bond. She showed them the truth of Kale's betrayal, the truth of Rorik's leadership, the truth of Holofang's spirit. And it worked. One by one, the rebel werewolves began to stand down, their claws retracting, their fangs sheathing, their eyes losing their malevolent glow, their bodies relaxing, their aggression subsiding. They were breaking free from Kale's influence, from his hatred, from his lies. They were returning to the pack, to the ancient pact, to Holofong. The shift in momentum was palpable. Rorik's loyalists, bolstered by the newly forged alliances, pressed their attack with renewed vigor, driving back Kale's remaining followers, isolating the rebel alpha, weakening his position, preparing for the final confrontation. Broken bonds were being mended. New alliances were being forged. The tide had turned. Hope had returned. But Kale remained. Chapter 17. The Heart's Sacrifice. With his forces dwindling, his rebellion crumbling around him, Kale stood isolated, a cornered beast, his eyes blazing with a desperate, cornered fury. He was surrounded by Rorik's loyalists, by the werewolves who had once followed him, who had now turned against him, drawn back to the fold by Lasara's appeal, by Rorik's leadership, by the ancient magic of Holofong. Rorik stepped forward, his form still partially shifted, his claws extended, his golden eyes blazing with a righteous anger, a controlled fury that was far more terrifying than Kale's unrestrained rage. "It is over, Kale," Rorik said, his voice a low, resonant growl that echoed through the cavern, silencing the remaining sounds of conflict, focusing all attention on the two alphas, on the final confrontation. "Surrender, and I will spare your life." Kale laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that lacked any trace of humor, any hint of sanity. "Spare my life?" He spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You offer me mercy? After you have taken everything from me? After you have stolen my pack? After you have defiled Holofong with this human?" He lunged at Lasara, his attack sudden and unexpected, his claws aimed at her throat, his intent clear. To kill her, to punish Rorik, to unleash his final act of defiance, of hatred. Rorik reacted instantly, his body moving with a speed that defied belief, intercepting Kale's attack, shielding Lasara with his own form, his claws and fangs meeting Kale's in a brutal clash of power, of will. But Kale was driven by a desperate, suicidal rage, his strength amplified by his madness. He managed to break through Rorik's defenses, his claws raking across Rorik's chest, drawing blood, inflicting a serious wound, a wound that made Rorik stagger, that made him falter. Lysara screamed, a sound of pure terror and anguish, a sound that echoed through the cavern, a sound that galvanized the werewolves, both loyalist and former rebel, uniting them against a common enemy, against Kale. But Lysara didn't just scream. She acted. She knew that Rorik was weakened, that he was vulnerable, that he needed her. She stepped forward, her own form shifting further, becoming more wolf-like, her claws extending, her fangs baring, her eyes glowing with the ancient magic of Holophong, with the power of the bond, with her love for Rorik. She attacked Kale, her movements swift and precise, her claws raking across his face, her fangs sinking into his shoulder, drawing blood, forcing him to retreat, to reassess his situation. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl that was both human and wolf, a sound that resonated with the power of Holophong, with the ancient pact. Kale stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and surprise. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the bond. He had underestimated the power of love. He lunged again, this time aiming for Lysara, his intent clear. To kill her, to remove her from the equation, to break Rorik's spirit. But Lysara was ready. She met his attack, her claws and fangs clashing with his, their battle a whirlwind of fury and power, a struggle for survival, for dominance. She was not as strong as Kale, not as experienced, but she was faster, more agile, fueled by the ancient magic, by the bond, by her love. She dodged his blows, parried his attacks, inflicted her own wounds, drawing blood, weakening him, forcing him to retreat.
But then she saw it.
An opening, a chance, a risk. Kale, in his rage, had left his chest exposed, his heart vulnerable, his life within her reach. She could end it. She could kill him. She could end the conflict, save Rorik, save Holophong. But she hesitated. She looked at Kale, at his eyes, and saw not just hatred, not just rage, but pain. She saw the loneliness, the isolation, the desperation that had driven him to this, that had led him to betray his pack, to betray himself. She understood. She had felt that same pain, that same loneliness, that same desperation. She had been lost, adrift, consumed by grief, until she had found Rorik, until she had found Holophong. She lowered her claws, her fangs retracting, her body relaxing, her aggression subsiding. "I will not kill you, Kale," she said, her voice soft, but firm, her words echoing through the cavern, reaching the ears of every werewolf present, silencing the remaining sounds of conflict, focusing all attention on her decision. Kale stared at her, his eyes filled with confusion, with disbelief. He didn't understand. He couldn't comprehend her mercy.
"Why?"
He whispered, his voice hoarse, his body trembling, his spirit broken.
"Because I understand," she said.
"Because I have felt your pain. Because killing you will not solve anything. It will not bring back those who have died. It will not heal the wounds. It will not restore Holophong." She extended her hand, offering it to Kale, a gesture of peace, of forgiveness, of hope.
"Let us end this," she said.
"Let us rebuild. Let us heal. Together." Kale stared at her hand, his eyes flickering with a mixture of emotions, confusion, disbelief, anger, shame, and finally acceptance. The rage left him with such speed he staggered. He looked up at Lysara, at Rorik, and then he began to weep. Chapter 18. Whispers of Redemption. Kale's tears, a torrent of grief and regret, marked a turning point, a moment of profound transformation, a surrender. He sank to his knees, his body shaking with sobs, his head bowed in shame, his spirit broken. He had been defeated, not by force, not by violence, but by mercy, by compassion, by love. Lysara's act of forgiveness, her refusal to kill Kale, her offer of peace, resonated through the cavern, touching the hearts of every werewolf present, dispelling the remaining vestiges of hatred and anger, replacing them with a sense of hope, of healing. Rorik, his wounds tended to by Lasara and the other werewolves, stepped forward, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and pride. He had been prepared to kill Kale, to end the threat, to protect his pack. But Lasara had shown him a different way, a better way, a way that honored the ancient pact, the true spirit of Hallowfang. He knelt beside Kale, his hand reaching out, not in aggression, but in support. "We have all made mistakes, Kale," he said, his voice soft, but firm, his words carrying the weight of authority, but also the balm of forgiveness. "We have all been lost. We have all suffered. But it is not too late. We can rebuild. We can heal. Together." Kale looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen, his face streaked with tears and blood, his expression vulnerable, hesitant, searching for acceptance. I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his body trembling, his spirit shattered.
"Perhaps not," Rorik said.
"But you have it nonetheless. We are all connected, Kale.
We are all Hallowfang.
And we must stand together, against the darkness, against the hatred that threatens to consume us." He helped Kale to his feet, the two alphas standing side by side, their former rivalry, their bitter conflict, replaced by a tentative, fragile understanding. It was a moment of profound significance, a symbol of hope, of redemption, a testament to the power of forgiveness, of love. The other werewolves, both loyalist and former rebel, gathered around, their eyes filled with a mixture of emotions, relief, gratitude, shame, hope, and a renewed sense of unity, of belonging. The bonds that had been broken were being mended, the alliances that had been shattered were being reforged, the spirit of Hallowfang was being restored. Lasara stood beside Rorik, her hand in his, her body radiating a warmth, a power, a love that embraced them all, that healed them all, that united them all. She was no longer just a human, no longer just a grieving widow, no longer just Rorik's mate. She was a leader. She was a healer. She was the heart of Hallowfang. The elders, their strength slowly returning, their forms radiating a brighter, steadier light, emerged from their weakened state, their eyes filled with gratitude, with admiration for Lasara, for Rorik, for the pack that had survived, that had overcome. The eldest of the council, the woman with long, silver hair and eyes that glowed with an ancient wisdom, stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, her words carrying the weight of centuries, of tradition, of magic. "The pact has been tested," she said, her gaze sweeping over the assembled werewolves, acknowledging their pain, their sacrifice, their triumph. "But it has not been broken. It has been strengthened. By forgiveness. By compassion.
By love."
She turned to Lasara, her eyes filled with a profound respect, a deep understanding. "You have shown us the true meaning of the pact, Lasara Rathmore," she said. "You have reminded us that we are not just creatures of instinct, of power, of violence. We are also creatures of compassion, of forgiveness, of love. You have shown us that the greatest strength lies not in our claws and fangs, but in our hearts." She smiled, a rare, radiant smile that illuminated the cavern, that dispelled the remaining shadows, that filled them all with hope. "You are truly one of us now, Lasara," she said. "You are Hallowfang." The werewolves howled, a unified cry of joy, of relief, of acceptance. It was a sound that echoed through the cavern, through the woods, through the land, a sound that proclaimed the rebirth of Hallowfang, the restoration of the pact, the triumph of love over hatred, of forgiveness over vengeance. The whispers began, amongst them whispers of a new age. An age of peace. Chapter 19. The dawn of a new era. The unified howl, a chorus of voices blending in a harmonious symphony of acceptance and renewal, subsided, leaving a palpable sense of peace, of tranquility in its wake. The cavern, once a scene of chaos and violence, now felt sacred, a sanctuary of healing, a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness, of love. The black smoke had cleared, the torches had been relit, casting a warm, inviting glow that illuminated the faces of the werewolves, their expressions softened, their eyes reflecting a newfound sense of unity, of belonging. The wounds of the battle, both physical and emotional, were still present, but they were beginning to heal, soothed by the balm of reconciliation, by the promise of a brighter future. Lasara, standing beside Rorik, her hand clasped in his, felt a profound sense of belonging, of purpose. She had found her place, her home, her family. She was no longer just Lasara Rathmore, the grieving widow, the outsider, the human. She was Holofong. She was a leader. She was a healer. She was loved. Rorik squeezed her hand, his touch conveying a depth of emotion that transcended words, that spoke of gratitude, of respect, of a love that had been tested, that had been strengthened, that had triumphed. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with an unwavering devotion, an unspoken promise of a future together, a future filled with hope, with peace, with love. The elders, their strength restored, their wisdom reaffirmed, stepped forward, their presence radiating an aura of ancient power, of benevolent authority. They had witnessed the conflict, the betrayal, the forgiveness. They had seen the darkness, but they had also seen the light, the dawn of a new era. The eldest of the council, her voice clear and strong, addressed the assembled werewolves, her words carrying the weight of centuries, of tradition, of magic. The events of this day will be forever etched in the annals of Holofong, she said, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the werewolves, acknowledging their pain, their sacrifice, their triumph. We have faced a great challenge, a test of our unity, of our spirit. But we have emerged stronger, wiser, more compassionate. She turned to Lasara and Rorik, her eyes filled with gratitude, with respect. You have shown us the true meaning of the pact, she said. You have reminded us that forgiveness is stronger than vengeance, that love is more powerful than hatred. You have led us to a new beginning, a new era of peace, of prosperity, of unity. She gestured towards the two of them, a symbolic act of recognition, of blessing. From this day forward, Lasara and Rorik shall lead Holofong together, she proclaimed, her voice echoing through the cavern, her words carrying the force of law, of destiny. They shall be the guardians of the pact, the protectors of the pack, the heart of Holofong. The werewolves howled again, a joyous cry of acceptance, of affirmation, of celebration. It was a sound that echoed through the cavern, through the woods, through the land, a sound that proclaimed the dawn of a new era, an era of peace, of unity, of love. Kale, standing amongst the other werewolves, his head bowed, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and hope, added his voice to the howl, a tentative, hesitant sound at first, but growing in strength, in conviction, as he embraced his new reality, as he accepted his redemption. Lasara and Rorik, their hands still clasped, their hearts united, looked out at their pack, at their family, their eyes filled with a shared vision, a shared dream. They would lead Holofong together, guided by the principles of forgiveness, compassion, and love. They would rebuild what had been broken, heal what had been wounded, and create a future where humans and werewolves could coexist in peace, in harmony, in unity. The sun, now fully risen, streamed through the entrance of the cave, bathing the cavern in a golden light, a symbol of hope, of renewal, of a new beginning. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and Holofong, united under the leadership of Lasara and Rorik, was ready to embrace it. Chapter 20. The Final Confrontation of Hearts. The golden light of the rising sun, streaming through the cave entrance, illuminated a scene of profound transformation. The chaos and violence of the previous hours had given way to a sense of peace, of unity, of hope. Holofong, wounded but not broken, stood on the cusp of a new era, an era defined not by hatred and division, but by forgiveness, compassion, and love. Lasara and Rorik, their hands clasped, their hearts united, stood at the center of this transformation, their leadership affirmed, their bond strengthened, their love a beacon of hope for the future. They had faced the darkness, they had overcome the betrayal, they had triumphed. But there was one final challenge remaining, one last thread to be woven into the tapestry of their new reality. A final confrontation, not of claws and fangs, but of hearts. Lysara turned to Rorik, her eyes searching his, her heart seeking reassurance. She knew what she had to do, what she wanted to do. But she needed his support, his blessing. Rorik, she said, her voice soft, but firm, her words carrying the weight of a decision long contemplated, a desire long suppressed. There is one more thing I must do. Rorik looked at her, his golden eyes filled with understanding, with love. He knew what she was referring to. He had sensed her longing, her yearning. He had felt it himself. I know, he said, his voice a low rumble, his touch conveying his unwavering support, his acceptance. And I am with you. Always. Lysara smiled, a radiant smile that illuminated her face, that reflected the joy in her heart, the peace in her soul. She turned to the assembled werewolves, her gaze sweeping over their faces, acknowledging their presence, their support, their loyalty. My friends, she said, her voice amplified by the magic that flowed through her, reaching every corner of the cavern, touching every heart, uniting them all in a shared moment. I have found my home here in Holofong. I have found my family. I have found my love. She paused, her eyes locking with Rorik's, her heart overflowing with a love that transcended words, that transcended worlds. But I have also remembered my past, she continued, her voice filled with emotion, with gratitude. I have remembered the love I shared with Thomas, my husband, the man who shaped my life, the man who taught me the meaning of love. She felt a pang of grief, a familiar ache in her heart, but it was different this time. It was not the overwhelming, consuming grief that had haunted her for so long. It was a gentle, bittersweet remembrance, a tribute to a love that had been, a love that had ended. I will always cherish his memory, she said. But I am ready to move forward. I am ready to embrace the future. I am ready to love again. She turned back to Rorik, her eyes shining with tears, tears of joy, tears of love. Rorik, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, her heart overflowing with a love that was both new and ancient, a love that was destined. I choose you. I choose you to be my mate, my partner, my love.
For now.
For always. For eternity. Rorik stepped forward, his eyes mirroring her own, his heart echoing her love. He took her face in his hands, his touch gentle, his gaze unwavering. Lysara, he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through her, that resonated with the power of the bond, with the ancient magic of Holofong, with the truth of their love. I choose you. I choose you to be my mate, my partner, my love.
For now.
For always. For eternity. He leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a kiss that sealed their union, their bond, their destiny. It was a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of compassion, of a love that had overcome all obstacles, that had triumphed over darkness, that had healed Holofong. The werewolves howled, a joyous cry of celebration, of affirmation of love. It was a sound that echoed through the cavern, through the woods, through the land, a sound that proclaimed the final, ultimate triumph of love, the dawn of a new era, the healing of hearts. Lysara and Rorik, their hearts united, their souls intertwined, their love a beacon of hope for the future, stood together, ready to lead Holofong, ready to embrace their destiny, ready to love. The final confrontation was over. Love had won. Epilogue. Years flowed like the river that snaked through Holofong, carving its path through the ancient woods, shaping the landscape, nourishing the land, reflecting the ever-changing sky. Time, the relentless sculptor, etched its passage on Lysara's face, silvering her hair further, deepening the lines around her eyes, but it could not diminish the fire that burned within her, the strength that radiated from her, the love that bound her to Rorik, to Holofong, to her new life. She stood on the cliffs overlooking the village of Oakhaven, the wind whipping through her hair, the scent of pine and damp earth filling her lungs, a familiar comfort, a constant reminder of the journey she had taken, the transformation she had undergone, the destiny she had embraced. The village below, once a place of fear and suspicion, now coexisted in peace, in harmony, with the werewolves of Holofong. The ancient pact, renewed and strengthened by Lysara and Rorik's bond, by their leadership, by their love, had ushered in an era of unprecedented cooperation, of mutual respect, of shared prosperity. Humans and werewolves worked together, traded together, lived together, their lives intertwined, their destinies linked. The old prejudices, the old fears had faded, replaced by understanding, by acceptance, by a shared sense of community. Lysara smiled, a gentle, contented smile that reflected the peace in her heart, the joy in her soul. She had found her place, her home, her family. She had found a love that transcended worlds, that defied expectations, that healed her wounded heart. She felt a familiar presence beside her, a warmth that radiated through her, a silent communication that transcended words, that spoke of a bond that had deepened over time, that had weathered storms, that had endured. Rorik stood beside her, his hand clasping hers, his golden eyes reflecting the setting sun, his form still strong and vital, his love for her unwavering. He had aged too, of course, the years leaving their mark on him, but his spirit remained untamed, his love for Lysara eternal. They looked at each other, their eyes meeting, their hearts communicating, their souls intertwined. They didn't need words. They had a language of their own, a language of touch, of glances, of shared breaths, a language of love. They had faced many challenges over the years, of course. There had been moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments of conflict. But they had always overcome them, together, their bond strengthening with each trial, their love deepening with each obstacle. They had built a life together, a life filled with purpose, with meaning, with joy. They had led Holofong with wisdom and compassion, guiding their pack, protecting their people, fostering a spirit of unity, of cooperation. They had also found time for themselves, for their love, for their connection. They had explored the ancient woods together, discovered hidden glades, shared quiet moments under the stars, their love a constant source of strength, of comfort. Lysara felt a gentle nudge against her leg. She looked down and smiled. A young wolf pup, its fur the color of moonlight, its eyes a bright, curious gold, gazed up at her, its tail wagging tentatively, its presence a symbol of the future, of the continuation of the line, of the legacy of Holofong. This was Alara's grandchild, a child born of both human and werewolf lineage, a living embodiment of the peace, the unity, the love that Lysara and Rorik had fostered. The child, named Thomas, after Lysara's first husband, represented the blending of two worlds, the hope of a new generation. Lysara reached down and stroked the pup's soft fur, her heart filled with a profound sense of gratitude, of fulfillment. She had found everything she had ever wanted, everything she had ever needed, here in Holofong, with Rorik, with her new family. She looked out at the setting sun, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking spectacle of color and light, a promise of a new day, a new beginning. She had lived a full life, a life filled with both sorrow and joy, with loss and love. She had faced her fears, she had embraced her destiny, she had found her true self. She leaned against Rorik, her body finding comfort in his strength, her heart finding solace in his love. She was at peace. She was home. She was loved.
She had lived.
She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, let it fill her soul, and whispered, "Thank you." The end.